Relax and take notes. This is Better Call Claude. I'm your host, Claudio Simpkins, and today we're talking about the L Train Shutdown. Now, in 2012, Superstorm Sandy came through and flooded the 100-year-old Canarsie Tunnel, which connects Manhattan and Brooklyn for the L train. Now, the Canarsie Tunnel consists of two different tubes. Obviously, there's the tube that connects from First Avenue in Manhattan heading into Brooklyn at Bedford Avenue. And there's another one where trains that pick up passengers at Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn will run through and get to First Avenue. What happened when you had Sandy was that there was a storm surge, and this storm surge flooded the tunnels and each tube individually with 7 million gallons of salt water. Now, this salt water is all types of corrosive. You can already imagine it doesn't do wonders for an already aging tunnel, right? That is already in need of all types of repair and maintenance. So what winds up happening is we had tracks, signals, power cables, communication cables, lighting, everything that's in those tunnels wound up severely damaged. And in order to protect the structural integrity of the tunnel, in other words, to make sure that it doesn't collapse and turn into a bad Sylvester Stallone movie while you're on the L train trying to get to work, the MTA decided that they were going to have to fix this tunnel. And they decided that they were going to have to take it offline for an extended period of time in order to do so. Traditionally, the L train during the weekday between Brooklyn and Manhattan, it takes about 225,000 people in or out of the city. Now, there's a large number of people that you're gonna have to find a way to accommodate because folks still need to get into the city independent of whether repairs need to be made on this Canarsie Tunnel or not. The MTA has traditionally said that it's gonna shut down the L train for 15 months, right? This is supposed to begin in April 2019. Originally, the MTA floated the idea of fixing one tube of the tunnel at a time, but when they did so, their estimate said that the repairs would end up taking about 3 years to complete. So they said, we'll bite the bullet, we'll shut down the tunnel in its entirety for 15 months instead of having all kinds of staggered problematic system for 3 years interrupting people's commutes. So recently, the MTA and the Department of Transportation released their preliminary plan for how they were going to address the L train shutdown. How are they still going to get people from Brooklyn into Manhattan and vice versa when you can't take the L train into the city or out? So there's a number of changes that are going to be coming down the pipe as far as they've already thought through and presented. Of course, all of this is subject to change, and I would expect that some of it would change as they continue to receive community input and people yelling at them online, or maybe they come up with some more brilliant ideas. But for now, this is what's been proposed. So first in the city, we're gonna see some changes, right? 3rd Avenue, 9th Avenue, 14th Street. When you have what the MTA is gonna call peak hours, these thoroughfares are gonna be shut down entirely to cars, and they're only gonna be made available for pedestrians, buses, and bikes. Now, 14th Street makes a lot of sense. People are gonna get from the east side to the west side to the east side along 14th Street. 3rd and 9th Avenues will help folks get uptown and downtown much the same way. What you're gonna see on 14th Street is they're going to expand the sidewalk and they're gonna provide like loading zones essentially for people to get onto the buses that will carry passengers across town. Now there's gonna be a question at exactly how these loading zones are set up, but we'll speak a little bit more about that later. What we're also gonna see is a little bit more pedestrian space, right? So all around Union Square, especially on Union Square West, the MTA is proposing to make increased pedestrian spaces. We don't know what this looks like just yet. We don't know exactly how that's gonna alleviate the crush of people needing to get from Brooklyn into the city, but it is part of their plan as they propose so far. Now, for people who cycle all the time, there is going to be a couple of changes as well, especially in the city. What we're going to see is on 13th Street. 13th Street now is going to have a protected two-way bike lane running east to west. So if you need to get from the east side to the west side and you're on your bike, 13th Street is going to be the way to go, and there will be protection, ideally, from all the motorists who are also still going to be on this thoroughfare. But let's be real, what happens along 14th Street ain't really gonna do much for us. If you're somebody who lives in Brooklyn and you're trying to get into Manhattan, having an express bus lane that cuts across 14th Street, it's not really helping you, dog. So let's talk about what's gonna happen with the train service, especially in Brooklyn. Now, the MTA is proposing to do 2 things, maybe even 3, that are supposed to help us during this shutdown. The first thing is they're saying that they're going to increase service, right? So they're going to have more trains running more frequently on the lines that are all around the L train. So this means the J, M, and Z trains are going to run much more rapidly. There's going to be more of them running, especially during what the MTA calls these peak hours. The same will go for the G train. The G train is going to run more frequently as well. And they're going to try and alleviate the burden by having free transfers now, especially where the G train hits the JMZ. So we're talking Lorimer, we're talking Flushing, we're talking Hughes, that little triangle. In theory now you're going to get free transfers if you're going from the G to the JMZ or vice versa. You'll also get free transfers if you're taking the L deeper in Brooklyn. If you get off the L at Livonia and you decide you want to switch to the 3 at Junius Street, you'll be able to do that with a free transfer as well. We're also going to see longer train cars, right? So you think a longer train car, more train cars on each train is going to mean a higher ridership, a larger capacity for people. And this is only going to be on a few lines though. So the C train now is going to have more cars added to it. And the same thing is going to go for the G train. This is their MTA's way of hopefully making room for more of the people who are not going to be taking the L because it's not running. And because you're going to have this crush of people who are now flooding to other stations and other lines, the MTA has realized that they're going to have to do something about access. So in theory, they've promised that they're going to open up 24 new stairways or entrances to stations on the L train line and also on all the lines that are around the L train. Now, another major way that folks are going to get into the city is going to be by bus. Now the MTA is going to be running 3 buses that are going to go from Brooklyn into the city. You're going to be able to catch 2 of those buses at Grand Street. Now one of those buses at Grand Street will run straight to First Avenue and 15th Street, and the other bus that you'll be able to catch at Grand Street is going to take you into Soho. Now the problem with this is that right now as is, the MTA doesn't have a plan to have those buses stop anywhere else in Brooklyn, right? They're going to pick up people at Grand Street and they're going to run straight into the city. And that's all fine and well and dandy, but let's say, for example, you don't live near Bedford Avenue where there's a 3rd bus that will also take you into Soho. You're going to have to find a way to get onto the trains. And if that means walking over to the Marcy stop for the JMZ, the Marcy stop might wind up pretty crushed. Also, we're going to see the M train service extended, right? So the M train is now going to run from Metropolitan Ave out in Queens, and then it's going to run into the city and go up the 2nd Avenue line. So now the M train, when the L train shuts down, the M train is going to stop at 96th Street and 2nd Avenue. And you're going to see a lot of changes to major kind of hubs. So one thing that the MTA has discussed is that they're going to improve pedestrian areas, walkways, and bike lanes around Myrtle Broadway, which, as a lot of you know, could probably use some work as far as traffic flow and pedestrian flow. They're also going to do the same around Nassau Avenue on the G train, improving all the crossways and the walkways so that it makes it safer for the larger numbers of people who are going to be using this hub. So now let's talk about how the Williamsburg Bridge is going to look, right? Now during these peak rush hours, the Williamsburg Bridge is going to be shut down to normal traffic. And instead, they're going to create HOV, not HOV, but HOV. They're going to make HOV lanes, right? It means that you're going to have 3 people in your vehicle if you're a private vehicle and you're trying to get over the Williamsburg Bridge during these peak rush hours. There will also be a dedicated lane for the buses that are leaving from Grand Street and Bedford Ave into the city during these peak rush hours. And we're looking at something like 70 buses, about 4,000 people every peak rush hour going over the Williamsburg Bridge by this route. In addition, for the cyclists who are going to be going over the bridge, we're finally going to see a protected bike lane that's going to connect Delancey and Allen to the Williamsburg Bridge. So no longer will you have to dip and dive through traffic when you get off the bridge with your bike and try and make it to the next bike lane, risking health and bodily harm due to, overzealous taxi drivers. Lastly, there's going to be an MTA ferry service that's going to play a big part in this. So there's going to be a ferry from North Williamsburg. You guys already know where you have the big towers and the fancy park and everything that's been redeveloped. This ferry service is going to carry people into Manhattan and stop at what's called Stuyvesant Cove. It's a stopover by Stuytown. Now, what the MTA is going to do is they're going to enable people who take the ferry into the city and stop at Sty Cove to catch an express bus that is going to then take them across 14th Street to the West Side Highway. So if you're trying to take the ferry and get to the west side of the city, the best chances are to take the ferry to Sty Cove, hop onto that M14 Select bus, take it across 14th Street, and get off somewhere on the west side. There's also going to be improvements to the bike lanes over there. So if you're the type of person who wants to ride your bike up the East River Park, or if you want to ride across town from that area, the MTA is going to try and make it so that there's an option to do that. Also for cyclists, this is going to be important. When you ride across 13th Street, the MTA is proposing to shut down University Place, that little kind of half block. And they're going to shut it down between 13th and 14th Streets and have a bike parking hub. So if you decide that you're going to take your bike into the city and then you're going to hop onto the train, this is how the MTA is going to try and accommodate you, enabling you to leave your bike right there by Union Square, hop on the trains, and motivate from there. But don't get your bike stolen. Now remember, through this whole process, April 2019, 15 months, L Train Shutdown, the L is still going to run in Brooklyn. It's going to run from Bedford to Canarsie. So if you need to go back to Broadway Junction or you need to transfer somewhere else, take the L train to Lorimer, hop on the G, that's always still going to be an option. It is only within Manhattan and from Bedford into Manhattan or First Avenue to Bedford that the L train is going to be shut down. Now there's a couple of questions that have been unaddressed and are kind of lingering and hovering over this entire topic, and this is what we really need to know from the MTA moving forward to understand if this plan is going to have any real efficacy. So the first thing that we need to know is how well will the buses run, right? If the buses don't run efficiently, effectively, regularly, then you're not going to see people taking the buses. You're going to see instead a lot of people flocking to these other train lines. Now the MTA estimates that approximately 70 to 80% of the people who would normally take the L train into the city are going to take the other trains into the city. But if the buses don't run well, you're going to see a much higher percentage, and that's going to create problems that maybe the MTA hasn't anticipated. Now this is already a problem because we've seen a number of major transit hubs that go into the city and service the city already experience crazy rush hour, especially morning rush hour problems. So a keen example of this is Court Square, where you have the G train, the 7 train, the E train, the M train. Even without the L train being offline, you can usually look into the news on any given weekday morning and find that there's some kind of issue at this station, or that the platforms are packed, or that commuters couldn't get onto the trains. So unless the MTA really thinks through how they're going to accommodate these folks, and unless they make sure that the bus service is reliable, effective, and rapid, you're going to see even more of an issue at some of these spots such as Marcy Avenue and Court Square. Now, second known unknown is how exactly we're going to be paying to get on these buses, right? Now let's think about it. You can elect to go with the route that the MTA has chosen for the select buses or the buses to the airports, right? You know, they've got these machines that are out on the street. You throw your MetroCard in that bad boy, they print out a receipt, then you get on the bus, nobody ever checks you, you get feeling mad at yourself because you feel like you could have just gotten on the bus without the little receipt and nobody would have checked you, but either way, that's neither here nor there. Basically, this system provides some level of, you know, getting on and off quickly. But the MTA hasn't endorsed this system necessarily yet for these buses during the L train shutdown. And a lot of people are saying that maybe these buses should be free. I mean, that would certainly make it so that people could quickly get on and off the buses if you didn't have to worry about swiping a MetroCard either on the bus or outside of the bus or making sure you had that receipt. You could just get on and off really quickly. Now, the other thing is the MTA is going to be basically renovating or building up these little transportation and boarding hubs at different places for you to get onto the bus. So if you're at Grand Street or if you're on 14th Street and you're getting on a bus, they're going to maybe fix the lip of the sidewalk and align it so that you should be able to rapidly get onto the bus, maybe without having to take a step up onto the bus. Now, this doesn't seem like a major issue, but it's going to be important to see how they build this out, because you have to think about the folks who are disabled or wheelchair bound who need to get on these buses and get around. If you have to take a moment and help somebody to get on because of poor thinking as far as how they design this, hub, then you're going to further delay the buses, you're going to further slow down the efficiency of the buses, and you're going to have more people that decide that they're going to opt to take the train, and that's something that perhaps the MTA hasn't prepared for. Now, a third thing that we're going to have questions for the MTA about, which is what types of buses are they going to use? Now, some of you know in the city they have these high capacity buses. These are the buses with the accordion in the middle that kind of swivel and sway. The key thing about these buses is that they have 3 different sets of doors. So you've got front, middle, and back for getting on and getting off of the bus. The traditional MTA buses, front and back, that's it. If you're going to have a ton of people taking these buses both into and out of the city and across town within the city, then you're probably going to want to use these high capacity buses, not only because they're going to hold the higher capacity number of people, but also just because it's going to make it so much quicker and easier to get on and off of the buses. And finally, there's a question of what is rush hour or what is peak hour, right? So a lot of these changes that the MTA is proposing, a lot of this plan, the increased service, the bus rides, the HOV lanes, a lot of these things will kick into effect during what the MTA calls peak hours. Now, the catch with this is a lot of folks who take the L train on a regular basis understand that rush hour on the L train can be like 12:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, right? You might be coming home from work and getting that first car so you can get off at Halsey, or getting the last car so you can get off at Larmer and quickly exit the station, and that car could be packed, and it'll be the middle of the night on a weeknight. So there's going to be really a certain significance to how the MTA decides to regulate when they increase service on other train lines, when they shut down certain streets to private vehicles, when they kick up the number of buses going across the bridge, because as we all know, folks use the L train at all different times, and rush hour on the L train could be on a weeknight or a weekend evening or a weekend day, just as much as it could be during a weekday morning and at 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock, typical rush hour. So there you have it. That's some of the details that the MTA has released so far about what their plan is to accommodate the shutdown of the L train. To recap, we're talking 15 months. That's a year and 3 months, but we're not talking about this starting until April 2019. Plenty of time for lots of changes, maybe even some community input, some activist action, organizing to maybe create more changes that might be more fitting for us. Now, there's still other questions that exist that we'll need more research into. What's the impact of this shutdown going to be on, say, businesses along Grand Street? Grand Street is going to see some change as they institute protected bike lanes along the length of it. What are the changes going to be to the rental price or the property value of homes in South and North Williamsburg? And of course, as we move forward, there'll need to be more work done to look into what impact this L train shutdown will have on the small businesses along Grand Street, all along property values in Williamsburg, and rental prices just the same. So there you have it, the MTA's plan for the shutdown of the L train. What do you guys think? Is Marcy Avenue ready to handle all this increased traffic? Will the buses get you from point A to point B in a way that is reliable enough for you to consider taking it on a regular basis? Or you're just gonna say, forget it all and hop on your bike and hope that the new protected bike lanes aren't so packed with traffic so as to make them useless? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, just let folks know. This is Better Call Claude. Today we've been talking about the L train shutdown, and we'll see you next time.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next